Hey guys, it's Emac here. Today we're going to talk about DevOps, infrastructure as code. In this video, we're going to learn about AWS CDK and how to deploy infrastructure using this awesome technology to Amazon Web Services Cloud. So there's a lot of technologies like CloudFormation, Terraform, but CDK uses your programming knowledge like C Sharp, Python, Java, or TypeScript to deploy infrastructure to cloud. This is the right way of doing things in DevOps world because you don't want to go to your console and clicking on things and changing things manually. You want to automate the process, make it completely consistent and testable before actually using in production environment. This is going to be a completely hands-on video with TypeScript and CDK. I noticed there's a lot of examples around Python, but there's not much with CDK and TypeScript. So I'm so excited about this video. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, guys, what is infrastructure as code? Well, if you code your infrastructure, all the resources, all the servers, all the routers, everything that you need in a JSON format, in a YAML format, in a file, and you can save it in a USB thumb drive, and you can, have your infrastructure in just a thumb drive. So think about it. You can codify, you can convert your infrastructure to only blueprint that holds all the configuration and settings for your infrastructure. You can save that into Amazon S3 bucket, for example, and from there you can deploy and create a real stacks from that template, and you will see real services running in your account, right? So this is a great concept when you are dealing with even small size environments. In big environments, there's definitely one way of doing things instead of just logging into console or doing manual deployment or removing buckets, adding things. You don't want to do that because you're going to introduce a lot of error and a lot of issues to your environment. Imagine big companies handling their infrastructure by manual clicks. This is just not going to work. So you want to be professional, or you want to learn infrastructure as code. So CloudFormation is a native and original and technically under the hood. Every single service uses CloudFormation for deploying resources, right? So CloudFormation technically gives you the ability to just create a blueprint, to create a map of the resources, of things that you need in your real environment. In the past, we used to, buy servers, connect them to the racks, attach a, router, make sure, we wait for the internet connection. So those days are gone. These days, in the modern environment, we want to create and manage and monitor our environment using great technologies like CloudFormation, Terraform, or AWS CDK. I'm sure you've heard of other technologies like Terraform, which is a great tool for cloud agnostic approach. If you want to deploy to a GCP, Azure, it works. But the problem with these technologies, even CloudFormation, is the way you have to define resources, and it's kind of really hard to start with for beginners. But once you understand how they work, the amount of code that you have to put in there to get one thing done, it's actually a lot, right? You're going to see shortly how we deploy infrastructure using AWS. Is pretty much with few lines of code you'll be able to deploy a cluster, for example, for ECS Fargate. If you want to deploy Lambda with 610 lines, you can deploy Lambda function. If you want to do the same thing in other technologies, it's definitely going to be a larger code base than that. So we'll get to CDK shortly, but let me show you guys something quick. So we understand that having infrastructure as code is necessary. Let's say you are hired and to work on a project for a airline company. Let's take a look at one of these examples on Amazon architecture webpage. So in revenue management architecture for airline, if you take a look, we're going to see a very complex, environment that uses a lot of S3 bucket. Let's say you might have thousands of S3 bucket. You can't just dial in and go to console and remove them or change them manually. You have Amazon Kinesis Firehose that's streaming data real time from thousands of other resources to your platform to do like machine learning platform. You have a cluster of EMR cluster for big data operation. You have AWS Glue. You have API Gateway, Lambdas, Dynamo. There's so many complexity here. You don't want to deal with this thing manually, and definitely you are going to fail. So, infrastructure as code. If you are going to be a good cloud engineer and DevOps engineer, you need to know infrastructure as code, and that is it. Period. Cool. So now we understand that we definitely need to have a solid tool in order to deploy our resources to cloud environment. Before we actually start doing hands-on experience, I want you guys to make sure you have AWS CLI downloaded, interface installed on your machine, meaning when you go right here, you can open a command prompt. And you can do AWS configure after installing your CLI. And once you do CLI AWS configure, this is going to ask you to enter your IAM secret key and access key. Go to IAM and get your user access key and secret key, and make sure this is properly configured. So technically, if you do AWS S3 LS, this should return a list of all the buckets in your S3. You see there's no error, meaning I can communicate with my account using command prompt. So make sure that's enabled. Also, I want you guys to download Node.js and Visual Studio Code and make sure npm is installed on your machine and ready for development. Perfect. So once you install that, then this is my account, and as you can see, there's no bucket and clean and clear. So we talked about CloudFormation stacks, and technically you create blueprints in CloudFormation, and from that blueprints, which is templates, you deploy real stack, real resources that shows up in your account, right? That's the right way. But we talked about AWS CloudFormation and other technologies like Terraform will be a little bit confusing, and you have to type too much to get to a point, right? We want to see what AWS CDK offers, and you will be surprised by this magic. All right, let's get started. So before we actually start diving deep into CDK and doing some coding, I want to tell you guys why CDK is super awesome. So imagine you are a JavaScript developer, imagine you are a .NET developer, you know some Python. You can use any of these languages to deploy infrastructure to cloud. So you can become DevOps engineer and cloud architect if you know one language really well, and also of course knowing AWS services. So I want you to think about that, leveraging using your programming skills in order to deploy infrastructure. What's happening here in CDK, we define applications, right? Let's say I have a revenue management application for this awesome financial company or for this airline that I'm building, right? So there is going to be a application. Within that application, you're going to have a bunch of stacks, right? Let's say you have database stack, you have services stack, you have front end stack. So every single stack that has a lot of constructs in it, right? And when we talk about constructs are basic building blocks of AWS CDK apps, right? A construct represents a cloud component. So I have a construct which is Amazon SQS. I have a construct which is Amazon AWS Lambda. So we put all these constructs together, we wrap them around the stack, and we deploy them as a group. But what it gets deployed to AWS, it's a CloudFormation template. This is the beauty of it. So you don't have to use, or it's awesome and great to know CloudFormation, but AWS CDK, using your knowledge in programming, in object-oriented programming, you will see you can create classes, you can create interfaces, you can have inheritance, and all those awesome stuff from programming language word. And CDK automatically under the hood converts that to CloudFormation code. You're going to see it, and CloudFormation gets deployed to AWS environment. So under the hood, CDK uses CloudFormation. I want you to understand this, and I'm going to show you how this actually is going to work. You will see that. But the idea is to create application, and within application we have stacks, and if stack has one or multiple construct. We're going to use Typescript for this programming session because there's not a lot of Typescript example. There's a lot of Python examples on the web and YouTube. I wanted to create this Typescript example so you guys learn how to use CDK with Typescript. It's going to be amazing. So the reason I'm not using JavaScript is in Typescript you can define types, right? Like Java. Let's say you want to have a type of string, boolean, you want to define those, and you don't want to wait for the compile time, for the runtime, to find out about those errors if you are casting something, one value from integer, for example, to string. So you will see why TypeScript, it has a lot of benefits, and that's what I'm going to use in this tutorial. So we talked about apps, we talked about construct. I'll let you guys to review these pages, but here's my account as an empty S3 bucket section. There's no CloudFormation deployed to my application. I'm going to go ahead and actually create my first CDK project. Perfect. So what I want you guys to do, you can follow this same thing. The first thing we need to do, we need to install AWS CDK. So using npm that we already installed on the machine, we're going to go ahead and install AWS CDK on my machine globally. And then for sure, we're going to go ahead and check the version of my CDK code. Let's do that. Perfect. Awesome. We see that. In the next step, what I want to do, I want to create a hello world application, just a directory. I'm going to cd into that. Perfect. While I'm in there, I'm going to go ahead and create my first TypeScript application. So it will be CDK init app -- language TypeScript. It can be Python, C# or any language that CDK supports. In this example, we are using TypeScript. I'm going to pause the video and wait for the installation to complete. So during that time, I want to explain a few important concepts about CDK commands. We're going to use those commands. So CDK ls, it technically lists all the stacks in your app. So let's say if you have 12 stacks in your application to get your system up and running, it will technically list all those stacks so you can deploy them all at once or one by one. We'll see how. CDK synthesize is technically converts your CDK code to AWS CloudFormation template. AWS CDK deploy, it will deploy your stack to cloud. It's like a Terraform apply thing. And you have also destroy. Destroy will destroy your stack. And diff, it compares your CloudFormation, the existing one, with the changes that you've made to the environment. CDK init is the command that we just used to initialize our project. So I'll let you guys review the rest, but CDK ls, CDK synthesize, CDK deploy, and destroy, these are the 4 commands that we're going to use many times in our projects. So I want you guys to make a note of this website. This is AWS CDK documentation, and it's the best place to learn CDK. So every single resource, as you see, for different language, Python, Java, .NET, whichever you're comfortable with, along with examples, you can find them here. If you are trying to deploy an S3 bucket to your environment, this is the place you want to look. You want to come to this place and you want to search, for example, for S3, and once you have the S3, you have all the properties, all the methods, everything that S3 covers can be found. You can find them inside this web page. So let's go back to our environment, see if it's ready. Yes, perfect. So I'm going to clear the screen and I'm going to walk you through the structure of a CDK project. So if I open this project, you will see, if you are familiar with Node.js and npm configuration, every single npm project comes with a package.json where you have a blueprint for all the dependencies in your project. As you can see, I have a dependency to AWS CDK core, for example, right? And you have some script in order to run, build, and watch and test your environment. So this is technically your blueprint. And as you can see, our bin folder is the entry point of our project, right? Which consists of a file called hello-cdk.ts. This is the entry point of my application, and I can confirm that inside my cdk.json file. There it is. So my app technically starts from this file. If you want to change the entry point of your project, all it takes is just create a new TypeScript file in your bin folder and change the starting point, and that's it. So bin folder is your starting point. So lib is all the libraries. Let's say if you want to define the resources by business use case, right? You can define them in different folders. You can organize the code based on the, based on the resource type, based on the business environment, based on the unit, however you want. You can organize your stacks inside the lib. right? So our stacks will be inside our lib folder. We're going to look into them. Node modules is all the modules that we install for the project, and test will be all the test files for integration and unit tests that you can define for your npm for your CDK project. Perfect. So we are looking at a very standard and nice and neat project, CDK project. So let's click on the entry point and see what we see. So I do see a few import, which defines my dependencies. As I said in the diagram, we do create a new app for our CDK, and within the app we do create multiple stacks, right? So let's say I have multiple stacks, app 1, app 2, and app 3, right? I want to show you guys something, and I want to go ahead and just run cdk-ls. So as I said, cdk-ls is the command that lists all of your stacks, and what it does, it technically converts your CDK code to CloudFormation template. And where you can find that CloudFormation template, it's in cdk.out. So if you take a look, I have now 3 stacks, 3 templates, CloudFormation templates, that gets deployed to my infrastructure. There it is. So you could technically go ahead and write this CloudFormation templates, but it will be a lot longer and more complex than CDK writing this, right? So we are using our application knowledge, our object-oriented programming knowledge with any language that we're comfortable with in order to deploy infrastructure. That's pretty neat and nice. That beats everything. I think this is probably the best, one of the best solutions and approach that I've seen in cloud, deployment technologies. So app 2, same concept. App 3, same concept. Perfect. So I do have 3 stacks that they all connected to app. So remember that picture that I showed you. Within the app, I do have multiple stacks. And as you can see, there are 3 stacks right here, which I can deploy them. And that's what we're going to do in the next step. So let's remove them. And I want to go back to the starting point. Perfect. It says hello stack. So what is hello stack? Hello stack is actually an import. It's a reference to something. Where did it come from? Oh, it says it came from lib folder hello-cdk stack. So as I said, all of our code goes to lib folder, and here are all the stacks. So if I want to create a second stack, I can simply say new stack, my new stack.ts. There it is. Here's a new stack. So I can create all my stacks inside my lib folder. Cool. So if you take a look at the stack, this says I'm a CDK module, right? Because I am declaring that I have access to CDK, all core concepts, right? Which is construct, app, everything, right? It says from this module, export a class, right? So the output of this module will be export. It will be exported class called hello.cdk, right? And as you guys remember, in the first step, we created a new instance of that class. And as programming rules dictates, we know when we create a new class object from a class, we call the constructor method first, right? So constructor, it will be the first method that gets called when you create a new instance from a class, and that's what's happening here. The scope of that is the cdk.construct, because we're creating that little piece and you have an ID, and props is the properties that are only readable within this guy. So we are using props to pass all the properties to this class so we can use them, right? Pretty neat and standard. Well, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to go back to the website and I'm going to try to create a new S3 bucket and deploy it to my AWS infrastructure. So if you go to the website, you're going to search for the component that you're looking for. If you want to deploy CloudWatch, you look for CloudWatch resource. If you want to look SQ, you look for SQS. So I'm going to, for practice, start with this guy. Since we are developing using TypeScript, I'm going to copy this guy. I'm going to do npm I. So npm install AWS CDK, AWS S3. This is perfect. So what I'm telling this guy to do, I'm saying go ahead and add this S3 to all my dependency. There it is. So it now my project supports S3, so I can start using S3. So by using npm I and then the module you can simply add it to your project. Perfect. Now that I added this, the only problem with this website is the examples that you see, they don't tell you about the import section of this code. So what you want to do after installing your module, you want to go ahead and import the module that you just installed, right? I said, okay, I just installed the module, but I want to go ahead and use it, right? And what you want to do based on the instruction, it says you can create a bucket by using the new bucket command, right? Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to say, since I imported that guy, S3 as an S3, I'm going to say create a new from S3 dot bucket. Perfect. And what's happening here, it says this, which refers to this instance, right? And I'm going to name this, let's say my bucket, right? This is the ID of this stack. This is not the name of the bucket, right? This is how CDK technically names and refers to the ID of this object, right? So, and as soon as I open the props, I do have a bucket name that I can set up here, say my first bucket dash code engine. Perfect. So you can, after defining a bucket, you can pass a bunch of properties to define, more features, more stuff that you want to set up for your S3 bucket or your resource. As you can see, you can define version, you can define public access read. Do I want people to read that? And you have all the features that you have in the console right here where you want to create a new bucket, right? You see all these stuff. These are available by IntelliSense in your VS Code. So this is pretty cool. So let's say for now, I just want to define my bucket name. So you put those within the curly brackets and you pass all the properties that you want to pass. But how do I know this exists? I know I just hit control and space to see all this stuff, but if you go back to the website, to the S3, on the right side, right, you will have here all the properties, right? This is all the properties that you can pass. You can set the bucket name, you can set the domain name, you can read the documentation because it is super helpful and explains every single thing that you're trying to create within your AWS account. So in order to test this idea, I want to go ahead and run CDK ls. I'm going to save this first, sorry. So we're going to run CDK ls again. We said we have an application, and within that application we have a stack. Perfect. So we're going to look and we're going to wait for hello stack. Perfect. This is not going to work, and the reason it's not going to work because I am creating a S3 bucket that has caps letters, right? So I'm going to say my first bucket code engine. So you see all the rules in AWS console, it now applies in my CDK, because at the end of the day, I am creating a CloudFormation template that will get deployed to my infrastructure. So this should hopefully give me a stack name. Yes. So if you have 20, 100, 1,000 different stacks, they all be listed underneath and you can deploy them one by one. So let's say we want to deploy this guy. CDK deploy, hello CDK stack. So this, as I said, will convert your CDK code to CloudFormation, and it's going to start deploying the infrastructure. And if I go back actually under my account to my CloudFormation section, you will see it says review in progress, and CDK basically using AWS CLI, now it's deploying using CloudFormation to my account, and I'm hoping to see a S3 bucket. There it is, it's creating an S3 bucket. So at the end of the day, we know CDK is using CloudFormation. So I'm going to wait for this progress, and it shouldn't take that long because we do have one resource that's being deployed to the infrastructure. There it is. So it says the deployment completed. So if I go back, there it is. I do have a CloudFormation template. It says I deployed. Now if I go to my S3 and refresh, I should have a bucket that says my first bucket code engine. Perfect. So click on it. It's an empty bucket. So I just showed you how to deploy an S3 bucket, right? Using Typescript and the documentation for any resource that you can imagine. You can find documentation here. But I want to show you the real magic of CDK, right? From the website, I want to go ahead and copy this guy, and I want to show you guys the real power of CDK code. Cool. So as I said, on their lib, we're gonna I created my new stack, right, folder. So let's take a quick look at this code. So in this code, this is the class that I'm actually creating. And by the way, don't confuse the class name with the file name. So let's take a look at this. So the file name is hello CDK stack, but the class name is hello CDK stack. And that is what is important when you are importing object to other files, right? If you're importing a module, make sure you are importing the class name, not the file name. Cool. So for example, in here, my file name is, my new stack, but my class name is my ECS construct stack. So let's say I want to create a cluster that deploys the ECS Fargate. This is all it takes to deploy and create a ECS Fargate service. So without actually diving into this, I want to go ahead and run CDK-ls. So this time, before actually we do that, we have to add that to our, we have to import the module, import. And as I said, you got to look at the class name, right? And here's the class name. And you do that from lib/my stack. And we're going to save this. So we're going to create a second stack. So one of the stacks will be the S3 bucket that's already been deployed. Even if I rerun it, it will not deploy again the same S3 bucket I already have. So CloudFormation checks to make sure the resource exists. If it exists, it's just going to skip it. So I'm going to create a ECS Fargate. Cool. So this will be a second stack, right? And this will be, there you go, using that class. So now if we run CDK-ls, I should have two stacks within my app. Let's see what happens. I wanted to show you guys something here to make sure you guys understand. This is on purpose. So as you can see, now I'm getting an error that ECS is not defined here. And if you take a look, it is correct. I am getting error here that ECS is not defined. And the reason for that, you guys should know by now, is I have to go ahead and define ECS to my environment. So I just click on overview. Perfect. And then I go back and I install my ECS. Then I go import all as ECS from this guy. Perfect. I'll make sure I have CDK installed. Now hopefully the error should be gone. Perfect. So now if I do CDK-ls, I should have another error, and you guys probably have noticed that, and that will be my ECS pattern, right? Okay, so I need another reference to ECS pattern, and if you guys notice, underneath I have ECS pattern. So that's another reference that this piece of code is using, and this will give you a good understanding of why we're getting all these errors. So I'm going to install that. After installing, I'm just going to import it. Quite simple, right? So, and all right, what's going to happen here? It's going to be as, select all as this, from that. Perfect, the error went away. We don't have any other error. I'm gonna run CDK ls again. So we also have another resource, that's EC2, that we need to install. So you guys probably know by now. I gotta just do control find EC2. Just gonna go ahead and install EC2. Oops. And then I'm just gonna import the EC2 dependency. Perfect. So as you can see, the this right now is giving me an error. It's not assignable to type of construct, which is correct. I'm just gonna change that to CDK to the stack, type of stack, and the props that I'm gonna receive, it's gonna be the same type, CDK.stack. So this error should go away. As you can see, this is fixed now. And I'm gonna do CDK ls again. We do have a class that's called my ECS construct stack that's extending that CDK stack, correct? And it does have a constructor that's that gets called when we create a new class. And what it does create a new ec2.vpc called myVPC with 3az by default. It's going to create a cluster within that VPC that we just defined. And at the end of the day, it's going to create application load balancer Fargate service for a cluster with CPU type of 512, desired count of 6, and with the image of sample of Amazon ECS sample, right? Memory limit 2048, and public load balancer is true. This is how we set up a Fargate load balancer. If you haven't watched my Docker on AWS video, I definitely recommend you watch it. But technically what we're doing, we're creating a container service that's managed under the hood using Amazon Fargate service. So we don't have to manage the instances under the hood. We just deal with the services. And this is where we're defining some parameters for our service. And if you guys recall, for when I created the S3, as I mentioned, so I refer to this object, I name the ID of the stack, and then after comma I can pass all the properties of my stack that I'm trying to create through these curly braces and define those values. Cool. So it looks like we do have an error that says scope.props. That sounds about right. Perfect. We do have an error. Now the reason is we don't have props undefined. It might be undefined. I'm just going to remove it for now, and it will be CDK ls. Perfect. Now I do have two stacks, right? The first one was the S3 bucket, and the second one ECS Fargate. So before I run CDK deploy and the stack name, this is how we deployed our stacks, right? What I want to do, I want to run CDK synth, which technically synthesizes the CDK application. It converts the CDK code to CloudFormation template. Let's see how that works out. So if I open that, there it is. I have a CloudFormation template that defines my VPC and hopefully deploys a Fargate cluster to my account. All right, so I'm gonna clear that. I'm gonna do CDK deploy and the stack name, and we're gonna wait for the deployment to complete. So as you can see right now, the account is telling me these are the changes that I'm going to make, and this is what I'm about to deploy to your account. Or do you want to continue? Yes. All right, guys, as you can see, the deployment is still going. And if I go back to my account, if I refresh my account, now you see I have a new stack. So there will be a list of a stack for your, hotel and travel company that I just showed you at the beginning of this lecture. There will be like hundreds of different stacks that will be managed only by CDK. Again, you don't want to manually go and remove and modify the stacks. This is how you want to deploy infrastructure to your cloud account. Perfect. So as you can see, the ECS Fargate is still deploying. If I go to events, you will see it's creating the Fargate, and here are the updates. If I go to resources, here are the resources. It already says I created a security group. I want to go now to my security group and confirm that. that there is actually security group being deployed to my account. There it is. So these are all ECS Fargate security groups. Inbound rule, port 80. So security group is great. Now if I go and take a look at my VPC, perfect. I did have one VPC, which was the default one, and hopefully there should be a second one. There it is, ECS Fargate. So without going to account and manually attaching and wiring all these stuff, I was able to create a VPC with security group and hopefully a ECS Fargate. So now let's go to ECS service. Lastly, container service. Perfect. It says there is already one Fargate cluster, and there it is. This is my desired capacity 6. There it is, desired capacity 6, pending count 5, and as you can see, there are 5 tasks, basically 5 services running under my cluster, so I can serve real traffic. So here are provisioning, and these are all Fargate. So you see auto scaling, deployment, pending 6, desired 6, and it is deploying actually. And here's my cluster that already manages those 6 nodes. So I have a network that technically within that network I do have 6 services running. So if I head back to EC2, and this should be hopefully done by now. As you can see, still deploying. It might take a while because this is a larger service, but I want to show you guys something quick here. If I go to load balancers, as you can see, there is a application load balancer being deployed to my application. So I can copy that guy, and there it is. This is sample PHP application that's being deployed to my ECS. I was able to deploy a containerized application to my environment with just few lines of code, guys. So there it is, the deployment completed. I should see all my tasks right now. They're up and running. So I have 6 technically microservices are running under the cluster, and they are the traffic from internet, which I hit the AOB, application load balancer, and application load balancer is basically redirecting the traffic to my container. And now if I go to listener, you see all the traffic that's hitting this application load balancer is being rerouted to my application ECS Fargate. So as you can see, any traffic that comes to port 80 goes to Elastic container service Fargate, which is running on port 80 and has 6 services running underneath. So that was it. So you saw with few lines of code, I was able to deploy a complete ECS Fargate application with load balancer, and it was actually working properly after deployment. So this is the power of CDK, right? Writing normal applications like this to deploy infrastructure to your AWS account. Now, in order to make sure I don't pay for these services because these cost money, I'm going to go ahead and do destroy, and this is going to destroy my ECS Fargate environment. So before we actually wrap up this tutorial, I want to show you guys something. CDK Typescript workshop. So you can search for the same thing. And if you go to the workshop, I want to show you guys something quickly. Now you can see, you will have a very, very clear understanding about the project. We did talk about CDK init, right? To create a new language. And as soon as we created that, then we went inside and we talked about project structure, right? Project structure, I talked about all these folders, about CDK Sint, that how you can convert your resources and CDK code to AWS CloudFormation, and then we talked about CDK deploy. Perfect. So the first time you deploy an AWS CDK app into an environment, basically you bootstrap the account. You can install Bootstrap Stack that includes resources for the first time that you are technically deploying to your account. So let's deploy. As you can see, we saw this with deploy command. You can deploy, and in this example, there isn't actually API gateway and Lambda. I'm not going to recreate it because there's not much value. You can just simply Google this and find this link. But the idea is, as you can see again, now if you read this code, it should be very, very easy to understand. You have a class that extends a CDK stack. We're creating a stack, and there's a constructor here, and there's nothing here at this point. It's just a structure. And as I said, when you run CDK diff, the difference will tell you that what's going to change and what has changed, because this is going to compare the local CloudFormation template with your CDK output. So CDK deploy, we talked about that. There's a hello lambda function that I'm assuming is going to just return a 200 code with a hello world, right? So we created a lambda function, right? And we put that in a folder maybe called lambda or functions/hello.js. So technically all you're going to do, you're just going to create a folder called functions and put that functions in there because we're going to refer to that, right? And the next thing you want to do, we talked about you install Lambda because we're trying to use Lambda, correct? And after installing Lambda, you can simply import Lambda. So we imported Lambda, we have AWS core, and here is our function. So this is functional. Now, in the next step, what's going to happen, we're going to need to have a API gateway. So we install API gateway and then we import API gateway. Very, very simple concept, right? And then what you want to do, you want to add a new resource that connects your Lambda function to API gateway. So this is all it takes technically to create a Lambda function and an API gateway using AWS CDK. Now you guys tell me how much work requires to deploy the same infrastructure using Terraform, right? It's going to be a lot different. So with pretty much 10 to 12 lines of code, you'll be able to create a Lambda function and connect it to API gateway. So we run CDK diff again. It will show you what's changed. Perfect. We deploy that, and you can just simply go ahead and test your Lambda and API gateway. So I just showed you 3 different examples, right, of setting up a Lambda and creating a API gateway and connect it to them, right? I just showed you in my personal account how to create a Fargate cluster using only 28 lines, right? And I showed you how to create different resources like S3 bucket. All you guys need to understand is this website should be your place to go. So any resource that you're looking for, if you're trying to deploy DynamoDB, there it is. You just go here, you collect this guy, any language that you're working with, you install it, and then you import it. You look at the syntax and the properties that you can pass. So, okay, if I want to create a DynamoDB table, I do const table equal new DynamoDB.table, and here it is. So if you scroll down, you see the billing mode, provision, and paper request. So everything that you have in the console or in CloudFormation or in Terraform, it's doable, it's convertible, it's achievable within CDK platform. So I'm going to go back and make sure in my real account, these resources, there it is. If I refresh that, since I ran CDK destroy, it's waiting for my confirmation. It will be hello whatever app, right? And while that's deploying, I'm going to also run CDK destroy. The second one is going to be only my S3 bucket. So the left one, I'm destroying the cluster, and the right one is just the one straight bucket. We're going to wait for the process to complete. All right, guys, this is all the resources have been removed successfully. As you can see, route table, internet gateway. So all the things that I needed to make this ECS Fargate work. Now you can think about deploying and troubleshooting and getting this ECS Fargate up and running manually. How many route tables? If you are running it for a let's say big entertainment company, if you're running infrastructure for big financial or healthcare company, imagine how many routes, how many services you have to maintain if you had to maintain those manually. Let's go back to console and confirm everything has been removed. Yes, I do have one security group. I do not have a VPC for my Fargate, which is perfect. There is no task. I had 6 they were running. Now if I refresh, there should not be perfect. Now I want to go back. My cluster is inactive, that's what I want to see. Perfect. If I refresh that, there's no resources, and if I go back to my CloudFormation, you see there's no stack here. So make sure you remove all the resources so you don't get unexpected charges. So there's nothing here, and of course the application load balancer should be gone. There it is. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. In this tutorial, we learned how to use AWS CDK with Typescript to deploy infrastructure to cloud. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. The link for the t-shirt, it's in the description section. And also please consider becoming a Patreon if you want to support the channel. And I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.